And what are they? Tell me yourself. Temperament is the primary requisite for the critic. Temperament exquisitely susceptible to beauty and to the various impressions that beauty gives us. Under what conditions and by what means this temperament is engendered, in race or in an individual, we will not discuss at present. It is sufficient to know that it exists, and that there is in us a beauty sense, separate from the other senses, and above them, separate from the reason, and of nobler import, separate from the soul, and of equal value. A sense that leads some to create, and others, the finer spirits, I think, to contemplate merely. But to be purified and made perfect, this sense requires some form of exquisite environment. Without this, it starves, or is dulled. You remember that lovely passage in which Plato describes how a young Greek should be educated, and with what insistence he dwells upon the importance of surroundings, telling us how the lad is to be brought up in the midst of fair sights and sounds, so that the beauty of material things may prepare his soul for the reception of the beauty that is spiritual. Insensibly, and without knowing the reason why, he is to develop that real love of beauty, which, as Plato is never weary of reminding us, is the true aim of education. By slow degrees there is to be engendered in him such a temperament as will lead him naturally and simply to choose the good in preference to the bad, and rejecting what is vulgar and discordant, to follow by fine instinctive taste all that possesses grace and charm and loveliness. Ultimately, in its due course, this taste is to become critical and self-conscious, but at first it is to exist purely as a cultivated instinct, and he who has received this true culture of the inner man will with clear and certain vision perceive the omissions and faults in art or nature, and with a taste that cannot err, while he praises, and finds his pleasure in what is good, and receives it into his soul, and so becomes good and noble. He will rightly blame and hate the bad now in the days of his youth, even before he is able to know the reason why. And so when later on the critical and self-conscious spirit develops in him, he will recognize and salute it as a friend with whom his education has made him long familiar. I need hardly say, Ernest, how far we in England have fallen short of this ideal, and I can imagine the smile that would illuminate the glossy face of the Philistine if one ventured to suggest to him that the true aim of education was the love of beauty, and that the methods by which education should work were the development of temperament, the cultivation of taste, and the creation of the critical spirit. Yet even for us, there is left some loveliness of environment, and the dullness of tutors and professors matters very little when one can loiter in the grey cloisters of Magdalen and listen to some flute-like voice singing in Wainfleet's chapel, or lie in the green meadow among the strange snake-spotted fritillaries, and watch the sunburnt noon smite to a finer gold the tower's gilded veins, or wander up the Christ Church staircase beneath the vaulted ceiling's shadowy fans, or pass through the sculptured gateway of Laud's building in the College of St. John. Nor is it merely at Oxford or Cambridge that the sense of beauty can be formed and trained and perfected. All over England there is a renaissance of the decorative arts. Ugliness has had its day. Even in the houses of the rich there is taste, and the houses of those who are not rich have been made gracious and comely and sweet to live in. Caliban, poor nosy Caliban, thinks that when he has ceased to make mows at a thing, the thing ceases to exist. But if he mocks no longer, it is because he has been met with mockery, swifter and keener than his own, and for a moment has been bitterly schooled into that silence which should seal forever his uncouth, distorted lips. What has been done up to now has been chiefly in clearing the way. It is always more difficult to destroy than it is to create. And when one has to destroy its and when what one has to destroy is vulgarity and stupidity, the task of destruction needs not merely courage but also contempt. Yet, it seems to me to have been in a measure done. We have got rid of what was had. We have now to make what is beautiful. And through the mission of the aesthetic movement is, though the mission of the aesthetic movement is to lure people to contemplate, not to lead them to create, yet as the creative instinct is strong in the Celt, and it is the Celt who leads in art, there is no reason why in future years this strange renaissance should not become almost as mighty in its way as was that new birth of art that woke many centuries ago in the cities of Italy. Certainly, for the cultivation of temperament, we must turn to the decorative arts, to the arts that touch us, not to the arts that teach us. Modern pictures are no doubt delightful to look at least some of them are, but they are quite impossible to live with. They are too clever, too assertive, too intellectual. Their meaning is too obvious, and their method too clearly defined. One exhausts what they have to say in a very short time, and then they become as tedious as one's relations. I am very fond of the work of many of the Impressionist painters of Paris and London. Subtlety and distinction have not yet left the school. Some of their arrangements and harmonies serve to remind one of the unapproachable beauty of Gautier's immortal Symphonie en Blanc Majeur, that flawless masterpiece of color and music, which may have suggested the type as well as the titles of many of their best pictures. For a class that welcomes the incompetent with sympathetic eagerness, and that confuses the bizarre with the beautiful and the vulgarity with the truth, they are extremely accomplished. They can do etchings that have the brilliancy of epigrams, pastels that are as fascinating as paradoxes, and as for their portraits, whatever the commonplace may say against them, no one can deny that they possess that unique and wonderful charm which belongs to works of pure fiction. But even the Impressionists, earnest and industrious as they are, will not do. I like them. Their white keynote with its variations in lilac was an era in color. Though the moment does not make the man, the moment certainly makes the Impressionist. And for the moment in art, the moment's monument, as Rossetti phrased it, what may not be said? They are suggestive also. If they have not opened the eyes of the blind, they have at least given great encouragement to the short-sighted, and while their leaders may have all the inexperience of old age, their young men are far too wise to be ever sensible. Yet they will insist on treating painting as if it were a mode of autobiography, invented for the use of the illiterate, and are always prating to us on their coarse critic canvases of their unnecessary selves and their unnecessary opinions, and spoiling by a vulgar overemphasis that fine contempt of nature which is the best and only modest thing about them. One tires at the end of the work of individuals whose individuality is always noisy and generally uninteresting. There is far more to be said in favor of that newer school at Paris, the archaicists, as they call themselves, archaicists, who, refusing to leave the artist entirely at the mercy of the weather, do not find the ideal of art in mere atmospheric effect, but seek rather for the imaginative beauty of design and the loveliness of fair color, and rejecting the tedious realism of those who merely paint what they see, try to see something worth seeing, and to see it not merely with the actual and physical vision, but with that nobler vision of the soul which is as far wider in spiritual scope as it is far more splendid in artistic purpose. They, at any rate, work under those decorative conditions that each art requires for its perfection, and have sufficient aesthetic instinct to regret those sordid and stupid limitations of absolute modernity of form which have proved the ruin of so many of the Impressionists. Still, the art that is frankly decorative is the art to live with. It is, of all our visible arts, the one art that creates in us both mood and temperament. Mere color, unspoiled by meaning and unallied with definite form, can speak to the soul in 1,000 different ways. The harmony that resides in the delicate proportions of lines and masses becomes mirrored in the mind. The repetitions of patterns give us rest. The marvels of design stir the imagination. In the mere loveliness of materials employed there are latent elements of culture, nor is this all. By its deliberate rejection of nature as the ideal of beauty, as well as of the imitative method of the ordinary painter, decorative art not merely prepares the soul for the reception of true imaginative work, but develops in it that sense of form, which is the basis of creative, no less than of critical, achievement. For the real artist is he who proceeds not from feeling to form, but from form to thought and passion. He does not first conceive an idea and then say to himself, I will put my idea into a complex meter of 14 lines, but realizing the beauty of the sonnet scheme, he conceives certain modes of music and methods of rhyme, and the mere form suggests what is to fill it and make it intellectually and emotionally complete. From time to time, the world cries out against some charming artistic poet because, to use its hackneyed and silly phrase, he has nothing to say. But if he had something to say, he would probably say it, and the result would be tedious. It is just because he had no new message that he can do beautiful work. He gains his inspiration from form, and he gains his inspiration from form, and from form purely as an artist should. A real passion would ruin him. Whatever actually occurs is spoiled for art. All bad poetry springs from genuine feeling. To be natural is to be obvious, and to be obvious is to be inartistic. I wonder, do you really believe what you say? Why should you wonder? It is not merely in art that the body is the soul. In every sphere of life, form is the beginning of things. The rhythmic, harmonious gestures of dancing convey, Plato tells us, both rhythm and harmony into the mind. Forms are the food of faith, cried Newman, in one of those great moments of sincerity that make us admire and know the man. He was right, though he may not have known how terribly right he was. The creeds are believed not because they are rational, but because they are repeated. Yes, form is everything. It is the secret of life. Find expression for sorrow, and it will become dear to you. Find expression for a joy, and you intensify its ecstasy. Do you wish to love? Use love's litany, and the words will create the yearning from which the world fancies that they spring. Have you a grief that corrodes your heart? Steep yourself in the language of grief. Learn its utterance from Prince Hamlet and Queen Constance, and you will find that mere expression is a mode of consolation, and that form, which is the birth of passion, is also the death of pain. And so, to return to the sphere of art, It is form that creates not merely the critical temperament, but also the aesthetic instinct, that unerring instinct that reveals to one all things under their conditions of beauty. Start with the worship of form, and there is no secret in art that will not be revealed to you. And remember that in criticism, as in creation, temperament is everything, and that it is not by the time of their production, but by the temperaments to which they appeal, that the schools of art should be historically grouped.